That afternoon, the police knocked on my door, saying I had abused Eli, my 6-year-old nephew I was taking care of. The accuser? My own sister. My parents even stood as witnesses, knowing full well the truth. Just admit it, we'll handle it within the family, they said. But then, when the backyard camera footage played, the room went silent. Rachel's face went pale. My mother looked away. My father couldn't utter a single word. That morning, I woke up before my alarm went off. Not because there was anything urgent to do, but because the birds outside had slipped into my dreams, pulling me into wakefulness with their steady, rhythmic chirping. Pale, new sunlight crept through the blinds, laying thin golden threads across the kitchen floor. The tiles were still cool under my bare feet. I passed the dining table, brushing my fingers lightly over scraps of colored paper left from last night. Eli had sat there for hours, painstakingly cutting and gluing to make membership cards for his dinosaur club. An idea entirely of his own invention, executed with a seriousness I couldn't help but admire. The coffee machine began its soft hum, dripping rich brown liquid into the pot, sending warm aroma curling through the kitchen air. Coffee always made me feel safe, like a small anchor in the middle of an unsteady sea of family memories. I inhaled deeply, letting the scent fill my lungs, determined to keep this morning exactly as it was: quiet, ordinary. Eli sat at the table, legs swinging in the air, messy brown hair catching the sunlight. He held a green crayon, carefully shading the body of a giant dinosaur in his drawing. His tongue poked out slightly as he focused, and I wondered if he'd still have that same expression of pure concentration when he was older. I leaned against the counter, silently watching him. There was something about Eli's innocence that made me feel seen, acknowledged, a feeling I rarely got from my own blood relatives. It was just an ordinary morning, I thought. No dark clouds, no bad omens. If I had known that by that afternoon the police would be knocking on my door, I might have held him a little longer, long enough for him to push me away, laughing that I was squeezing too tight. Eli suddenly set down his crayon, eyes lighting up as he glanced toward the back door. "Auntie, look. I can ride with one hand." His voice rang out, full of pride, like he was about to break some world record. I laughed, waving a hand at him. "Careful, Eli. Keep both hands on the handle." I tried to sound serious, but my amusement bled through. The back door creaked open, and the sound of bicycle wheels rolled across the damp patio. Eli pedaled in slow, triumphant circles, hair flying, his small legs pumping as if that was the most important thing in the world. I turned back to the kitchen, lifted my coffee cup, and took another deep breath. In that moment, I believed this morning would pass like any other, peaceful, simple. I had no idea that just a few hours later, that same backyard where Eli was now riding would be labeled a crime scene, in a story someone was all too ready to invent to destroy me. The knock wasn't polite. It was sharp, deliberate, the kind of sound that makes the air in your chest stall for just a second. I set my coffee cup down, the ceramic clink suddenly too loud in the quiet kitchen. It came again, 3 heavy thuds against the front door. I walked down the hallway, every step sounding strange in my own ears, like the floor had turned hollow overnight. Through the glass panel beside the door, I could see them, 2 officers. One tall, with a shaved head and a jaw set like it had never learned to relax. The other, broader in the shoulders, hands clasped in front of him in that practiced way that says we're not here for small talk. When I opened the door, the taller one glanced at his clipboard, then looked at me directly. "Emma Carter?" My mouth felt dry. "Yes." He didn't nod, didn't smile. "We have a report regarding possible physical harm to a minor in your care." For a beat, I just stood there, staring. "What? Who said that?" "The child's mother," he replied, tones so even it could have been recorded in advance. "Rachel." Her name didn't leave my mouth, but it screamed inside my head. Somewhere down the hall, I could hear the faint sound of Eli humming to himself in the spare bedroom, completely unaware that, in the span of 30 seconds, his world and mine had tilted sideways. I stepped back automatically. "You can come in," I said, because people who are innocent don't slam the door. People who are innocent cooperate. At least, that's what I'd always believed. They moved past me into the living room, their boots dull against the rug. The taller officer's gaze swept the space. Photos on the wall, toys on the coffee table, the faint smell of crayons and cereal. The broader one spoke this time. "Where is the child now?" "In the bedroom," I said, pointing down the hall. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. The tall officer exchanged a glance with his partner, then said, "We'd like to speak with him privately." Privately. The word landed heavier than it should have. "Of course," I said, forcing my voice steady. "He's just—" I hesitated, suddenly aware of how quickly this could spiral. "He's just drawing. He's fine." They didn't answer, only started toward the hallway. I followed a few steps behind until one of them turned slightly, blocking me without making it obvious. It was a practiced move, the kind that tells you they've done this before, maybe 100 times. The kind that makes you realize this isn't a misunderstanding to them. I stood there, watching as they disappeared down the hall toward Eli's room, my hands hanging useless at my sides. Somewhere in the pit of my stomach, something cold had started to spread. I told myself it was shock. But deep down, I already knew this was the beginning of something much worse. The living room smelled faintly of lavender and stale coffee. Rachel's house always did. I stood just inside the doorway, feeling like an intruder despite the fact I'd been summoned here. My parents were seated together on the couch, close enough that their shoulders touched, both with that same careful, unreadable expression. Rachel sat in the armchair opposite them, Eli curled into her side, his small head tucked under her chin. Her arm wrapped protectively around him, and in her free hand she held a few glossy photographs.
She didn't waste time.
"I'm sorry you had to hear it from the police," she began, eyes flicking between our parents and me, but I couldn't ignore it. "I saw the bruise, and Eli told me what happened. You yelled at him, grabbed his arm too hard. You scared him." Her voice trembled just enough to sound genuine. It was a performance, and she was good at it. I stared at her, disbelief prickling under my skin. "Rachel, you know that's not what happened." She lifted her chin. "I saw the bruise. Eli told me you yelled and grabbed him." I took a step forward, my hands curling into fists at my sides.
"He fell."
"In the backyard. You weren't even here." Rachel's eyes hardened, the softness gone. "He told me what you did." My father shifted in his seat, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Emma, we don't want this to get ugly. Just admit it was a mistake, and we can keep it in the family." The words hit me harder than Rachel's accusations. Keep it in the family. That phrase we'd all been trained to obey, even when it was a lie. My mother spoke for the first time, her tone calm, almost soothing. "Rachel video called us that night. We saw the bruise." Eli confirmed it. I turned to her, my voice catching in my throat. "You saw him? Or you saw a picture, and believed whatever she told you?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Eli shifted in Rachel's lap, eyes darting to me for the briefest second, then back down at the floor. My chest tightened. He wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of the tension in the room, the way adults can build walls with words alone. "Emma," my father said, his voice low, almost pleading, "just take responsibility for this. It'll go easier if you do." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Easier for who? For me, or for all of you?" No one spoke. Rachel's grip on Eli tightened just slightly, as if she thought I might lunge across the room. The absurdity of it burned in my chest. I wanted to shout, to rip those photographs from her hand and show them for what they were, a story told without context, without truth.
But I didn't. Not yet.
Because in that moment, standing there with all their eyes on me, I understood something. They'd already decided what to believe. And the truth? It was the last thing they wanted. If you've lived your whole life in someone's shadow, you start to recognize the temperature of favoritism. It's not always warm. Sometimes it burns. Rachel and I had been circling each other for years. Never close enough to be friends, never distant enough to be strangers. She was the one my parents trusted without hesitation. The golden child. The default. If she said the sky was green, they'd just ask what shade. I don't remember the exact moment I realized we were playing different games. Maybe it was in middle school, when I got grounded for a C in math, and Rachel got a congratulatory dinner for a B-. Or when I saved up for weeks to buy Mom a birthday gift, and Rachel handed her a card she clearly pulled from a drugstore on the way home, and still got called thoughtful. But this wasn't just about old jealousy. This was fresh. This was recent. A few months ago, Grandpa sat me down in his kitchen, the one with the linoleum floor worn smooth in front of the stove, and told me he was planning to leave me his house. The yellow one with the uneven steps, the one I used to escape to when home got too loud. Not just the house, but the small savings account he'd built over decades. "It's not much," he'd said, "but it's yours. You're the only one who's ever been here without wanting something from me." I didn't tell anyone. But secrets have a way of leaking, especially in families. Rachel found out. I don't know if Grandpa mentioned it to her in some offhand way, or if she overheard something she wasn't meant to. But when she looked at me after that, there was a tightness around her eyes I hadn't seen before, a smile that didn't quite reach. 2 weeks later, she called. "Hey, I've got a work trip coming up," she said. "It's last minute, and I don't want to leave Eli with Mom and Dad. You know how they are. Can you keep him for a couple weeks?" I hesitated. Rachel never asked me for favors, at least not without some hook in the bait. "Sure," I said slowly. "Where to?" She laughed, airy and casual. "Just a conference in Miami." The conference, as it turned out, had a beachfront balcony and a full spa menu. I saw the pictures later on her social media. Not a single photo of a presentation or a meeting. Just cocktails by the pool, her hair twisted up with a flower. At the time, I brushed it off. Let her have her vacation. Eli was easy to look after. He liked drawing, riding his bike, watching cartoons before bed. And for a while, those 2 weeks were just that, quiet. Ordinary. But looking back, I can see it now. How neat the timing was. How quickly the bruise became a story. How the story became an accusation. And how the accusation became an opportunity. Because if you can't win an inheritance outright, sometimes you just try to make sure the other person loses it first. It was only after the meeting at Rachel's house, after the weight of their stares and their silence had settled like wet cement around my ribs, that the thought hit me. The camera. I'd almost forgotten about it. A cheap little security camera I'd mounted on the back porch 6 months ago, not to catch thieves or prowlers, but to keep an eye on Max, my overly curious shepherd mix who had a knack for squeezing through the fence when no one was watching. The camera faced directly toward the patio and the patch of grass where Eli spent most of his afternoons. It wasn't fancy, no Wi-Fi, no cloud backup, just a plastic housing with a motion sensor and a tiny SD card slotted into the side. It recorded in short bursts whenever it detected movement. Most days, all it caught were Max's tail chasing circles or Eli riding his bike in wide loops. But if it had been recording that afternoon, if it had seen the fall, if it had captured the moment before Rachel's version of events replaced reality, my pulse quickened, thudding in my ears. The footage wouldn't prove who told the story, but it would prove the story wasn't mine. And that was enough to start unraveling this whole mess. The problem was time. Rachel had keys to my place. So did my parents. If she suspected the camera existed, or remembered it, that SD card could vanish before I ever laid eyes on it again. I didn't have the luxury of waiting. They'd given me one phone call earlier at the station. I hadn't used it yet. My hands felt stiff as I pulled my phone from my pocket now, dialing the one person I trusted without question. Mia picked up on the second ring. "Hey." "Mia, listen carefully." I cut in, my voice low, urgent. "Backyard camera. SD card in the side slot.
Get it today.
And take Max with you." There was a pause. "What's going on? Are you okay?" "Not really," I admitted, and my voice cracked just enough for her to hear it. "Just trust me. And don't tell anyone." "I won't," she said without hesitation. "I'm on my way." When the call ended, I stared at the black screen of my phone, willing the plan to hold together. It was a thin thread, but it was the only one I had. I pictured Mia pulling into my driveway, Max bounding toward her like he always did. I pictured her unscrewing the little plastic cover, sliding the SD card into her pocket, driving away without a word to anyone. For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of something sharp in my chest. Not quite hope, but close enough to keep me breathing. The conference room was small, beige, and humming faintly from the overhead lights. Everything about it felt impersonal, the kind of space built for paperwork and quiet admissions, not the kind of reckoning we were about to have. Carla sat beside me, her posture upright, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of her laptop. Across the table, my parents sat together, rigid, their hands folded in ways that looked rehearsed. Rachel occupied the chair beside them, her arms crossed, sleeves pulled down over her hands like she could hide inside them if she needed to. Carla didn't waste time. She flipped open the laptop, turned it so it faced them, and clicked play. The footage began grainy but clear enough. Eli, riding his bike in the backyard, the afternoon sun warm on the concrete. His small frame wobbled, then the front wheel twisted. He toppled sideways, landing on the grass with a soft thud. I saw his face scrunch, not in terror, just the startled pain of a kid who'd taken a minor spill. For a moment, the screen was empty except for him getting up, brushing his hands against his shorts. Then Rachel appeared from the side, stepping quickly toward him. She crouched, checked his arm, her eyes darting briefly toward the camera, the kind of flicker you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. And then she pulled him gently but deliberately toward the far corner of the yard, out of the bike's path but still in full view of the lens. She adjusted the angle of his arm, tugging his sleeve back to reveal the faint mark, and held it there. One hand on his shoulder, the other snapping a photo with her phone, close up, no background, no context. Then the screen froze on that moment, the moment that had become the centerpiece of her story. Rachel's face went pale. Not white like a blank page, but drained, like the color had been pulled out of her by an invisible thread. Her mouth parted, closed, then opened again, without sound. My mother shifted in her seat, gaze sliding toward the wall as though the beige paint suddenly deserved her full attention. My father's lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw tightening. He didn't speak. Carla's voice broke the silence, calm and precise. "Would you like to explain what we're seeing here?" Rachel swallowed, her hands still tucked under her sleeves. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I stared at her, my voice steady. "You mean framing me for hurting your son was supposed to be harmless?" Her head snapped toward me, eyes flashing. "You don't get it. You've always been the favorite to Grandpa." A short, humorless laugh escaped me.
No, Rachel.
I'm just the one who didn't lie. The room felt tighter then, like the walls had edged in a few inches. No one else moved. My mother's knuckles whitened around her folded hands. My father kept his eyes on the table. Rachel opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. Whatever defense she'd been building collapsed under the weight of the image still frozen on the screen. For once, I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it stretch, heavy and suffocating, until it was clear they weren't just seeing me differently, they were seeing themselves. And it wasn't a version they could live with. The weeks that followed moved both too fast and too slow, a blur of phone calls, official letters, and meetings in cramped offices, all set against the quiet hum of a life I was trying to reclaim. Rachel's voice was no longer the one people believed without question. The footage had made its way into the hands of the police, then the district attorney's office. By the end of the month, she was under formal investigation for filing a false report and providing fabricated evidence. The custody order shifted almost overnight. Eli went to live with his father for the time being. The Child Protective Services report arrived in a plain envelope one rainy Thursday. I read every line twice. No evidence of abuse. No signs of neglect. My name was cleared, but the words still felt heavier than they should have. Not because I doubted them, but because I knew the truth had to be proven at all. I didn't go back to my old house. Instead, I moved into my grandfather's place, the house I'd visited every summer as a kid, with the porch swing that creaked when you sat on it and the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen at sunrise. There, the air felt clean. My phone stopped buzzing with my parents' calls after the first 2 weeks. I didn't miss the sound. Eli still called, sometimes. Usually in the evenings, from his father's living room. He'd wave at the camera, holding up his latest drawing or telling me about the new bike he wanted to try. His smile reached his eyes again, and that was enough for me. One night, as I sat at the kitchen table with my grandfather, he poured us both tea. The rain tapped gently against the window, and the old clock ticked in the background. Sometimes, he said, his voice slow and deliberate, family isn't who you're born to. It's who stands by you. I met his gaze, feeling something settle inside me, not sharp, not heavy, just still. I think I finally understand that. And for the first time in months, I realized I wasn't holding my breath anymore. If you felt the tension, the pain, and the sense of release in this story, please subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. Every interaction from you is not only the motivation for me to keep telling powerful stories like this, but also a reminder that truth and courage will always deserve to be heard.